Owen's been part of our event now for a couple of years, one of our veterans. Always a great presentation when we get Owen here, and so we're really excited to hear him talk a little bit about the future and kind of maybe an Akamai bend to some of this stuff. So if you'll all join me in welcoming Owen to the stage here, and as soon as he's done, we'll get going. Thank you.
Well, I know I'm standing between you guys and the wonderful traffic on the way home, so I won't. I'll try not to take up too much of your time. I did not turn on 41 million cable modems. So I'm following kind of some tough acts. I didn't convert the United States government to V6, though I think I helped a little bit. But Akamai did help a lot of that content that John's talking about get delivered to his customers over V6, so maybe that counts for something. Most of this is relatively dry statistics about, V6 is progressing, we're going up and to the right, but we'll go through it pretty quickly. This is all stuff you guys already know. There's only 4 billion v4 addresses, and only 3.2 of them are actually usable, and so, let's move on. Yeah, V6 works, it's good. NAT sucks. You guys have all seen this already, right? Like 12 other people before me have said, V6 good, NAT bad. You don't need me to go into the details. Mobile, a lot of V6 traffic there. We're seeing an awful lot of that, thanks to Verizon, and yeah, even Stefan did some stuff. And I'm giving him shit because I've only got 2 bars here on the good parts of the day and 1 bar most of the time. So, he needs to go build something to make the service better. Faster page load times, not a surprise. Akamai says this, Facebook says this, LinkedIn says this, Google says it, so it must be true. Apple App Store, we all know about that. We've covered that earlier. And it's getting used to solve business problems. You may have heard Comcast is actually switching their X1 boxes over to V6. So that's, like I said, it's tough following all these guys. So we are committed to help our customers with a smooth transition. We recently, about 9 months ago, changed the Akamai default from when you stand up a new service with us, you have to turn V6 on deliberately, to now when you stand up a new service with Akamai, if you don't want it to be delivered dual stack to the rest of the world, even if we're fetching it via V4, you have to specifically tell us that. We are by default going to serve all of your content to the world V6 and V4, unless you deliberately go in and tell us otherwise. We are making progress on IPv6 only origin service. There's a certain customer in Menlo Park that has been pushing us very hard on that, and we're getting there. We actually do have some of that in trial. So why is this taking so long? We only started in 1990. Part of it is there's actually a lot of different pieces that have to come into play, and some of them are further along than others. OS support, client software, infrastructure, and backbone support. The good news is that's mostly there at this point. We're not seeing too many big problems with that, a few small ones here and there. Content availability. Are you listening, Amazon? Amazon.com, even though AWS is on V6, still isn't. It would be really, really nice if it got there. That would solve a big chunk of the remaining V4 only problem out there on the internet. End user connectivity, that's making solid progress. Big help there from Comcast and a couple of others, Cox and Charter as well. CPE device support, well, there's actually been negative progress there in some regards, like I was just talking about Netgear, and some of the vendors that were putting V6 in their products for a while seem to have sort of stopped putting V6 in their products for a while, and worse yet, vendors are starting to advertise V6 support in products that don't have it, and it's getting very, very confusing. And I'm not quite sure how an end user goes and makes sure that they can buy a product off the shelf that actually has v6 support anymore, because the ones that claim to don't necessarily. So that's not good. Fortunately, as all of this stuff starts to escalate, it works in a cycle. So as we get more v6 content, that drives more v6 traffic. More v6 traffic drives more v6 connectivity, more peering sessions, more interconnection, et cetera. That drives more v6 eyeballs, which drive more content, and each one of them helps bolster the other as we go around the circle. So it is actually accelerating up and to the right, which is a good thing. Adoption status: more than half a billion v6 addresses per day from 5,000 client networks that we see as of the fourth quarter of last year, actually. So that's pretty significant. As a fraction, we see roughly 2 billion to 3 billion unique addresses per day total. So 500 million is not an insignificant portion. 3 billion IPv6 addresses per week and 10 billion per month. Robust and mature support. By the way, the reason those numbers escalate in v6 is probably mostly due to privacy addresses, where people are rotating their addresses, so we see the same person coming from different addresses over time. We're seeing robust and mature v6 support in most operating systems. One of the glaring exceptions until recently has been the lack of RDNSS support in Windows, but that's getting solved, fortunately, so that's good. Some embedded devices and custom client software lag behind. Anecdotes for IPv6 preference from leading devices. It's all the same statistics you've been seeing from other people. These are some interesting ones where we break down different countries. India recently just started turning on v6 like crazy. So that graph that shows 6.6% there in the top middle, with more current numbers, that's actually up almost to 20%. It's not just the one mobile provider. We're actually starting to see some of the other ISPs in India follow suit finally. So I think we're going to see more and more progress there, and if that gets moving, we're in good shape. Yes.
Just a comment, like in India, is it mainly Reliance Jio or?
I don't name names of providers that we get statistics on our slides from. We deliver aggregated statistics, and we do that for a number of different reasons. It's very hard for us to sort out the data that we've got that's proprietary to particular customers and the data that's not. And so by producing only aggregated statistics, we're able to keep everybody happy and live within our NDAs and whatnot. Belgium up at 38%, doing very nicely. Ireland has these weird, every once in a while they'll just drop off and then they'll come back for a while. And I'm not sure what that's about. All of these graphs tend to be a little bit spiky. As you can see, there's weird dropouts in the middle of almost every one. But they're almost all going up and to the right. The United States is up around 22.5%. I think we can largely blame John and Stefan and a couple other providers that may or may not be in the room for that, but it's been making very good progress. That's just zoomed in. Looking at the US, Verizon is 80% v6 enabled, T-Mobile 77.6 from what we can see. Sprint finally figured out how to spell v6, and they've gotten up to 30%. AT&T is still struggling with the particular spelling, apparently, still down around 13%. Comcast doing very nicely at 42.5%, and we actually think that that's artificially low due to customer capability rather than Comcast progress. Yes, Joe?
You don't have Fios on there. You don't have Fios on there.
That's because Fios is still flatlined at 0.
It's now on the record.
They don't show up because they don't show up. You got to come to the party if you want to show up. AT&T turned on 6RD for a lot of their DSL customers nearly overnight. It'd be nice if they'd turn on actual V6 at some point, but at least we're seeing stuff come from them that looks like V6, so that's progress. Google Fiber has done nicely. They've, to the best of my knowledge, been basically V6 able from day one, so they've got the advantage of a greenfield deployment there. And again, I think the limiting factor that's holding them at 55.5 instead of 100% is customer capability rather than their network, because these are actually statistics of what fraction of the traffic we're seeing on V6 rather than statistics of what the provider could do, or what percentage of their subscribers are enabled. We're seeing great growth in a lot of the networks. T-Mobile has been ramping up very nicely. Verizon has ramped up very nicely. They're kind of starting to plateau because they've cleared that 80% threshold where it just doesn't go up much more than that for a while. We see a lot of sites that are nicely V6 enabled, including Akamai and some others. I actually had to look up that one that looks like a bird with a K stuck to it. It's some sort of social network that's popular, I think, in Germany. But could be Russia, I don't know. Hundreds of dual stack host names, serving over 1 billion requests a day on Akamai currently, so that's doing nicely. Android is seeing better performance over V6 than Akamai, and iOS as well, but I don't have a slide for them. Our State of the Internet report, fourth quarter 2016 is what's currently available, and most of those graphs come from that. What?
You're going to hate me, Owen?
What else is new?
Look at your widget.
Yeah, actually not my slide deck. So I'll have to beat Mr. Nygren up for that one. This is a slide I got from Eric Nygren. But yeah, fair point. Yeah, I probably should have, and I probably will, but I just didn't notice it before. Okay, so pitfalls and gotchas. Well, watch out for widgets when you're creating slides. Even in 2011, we observed a lot of infected hosts that saw a quad A record appear and followed it. Bots are definitely supporting V6. Malware is V6 ready in some cases. Yeah, partially. We're blocking ongoing probes from IPv6, over 15 million per day in 2015 from all around the world. It's, believe it or not all of the hackers live in, name your favorite Asian country. Make sure your firewalls support IPv6. Akamai security features do support IPv6 today. Systems handling IP addresses may need updates. It's not just your internet-enabled applications. It's anything that stores IP addresses in a database. Trying to store a 39-character IPv6 address in a 15-character client IP field does not work well. Bad things happen. Storing V6 records or V6 addresses as text, also bad things happen because vendor A will render a 128-bit string one way, where vendor B will render it another, whereas vendor C may render it a different way. Some of them will put a 0 in between every colon. Some of them will take the largest group of zeros and turn that into a double colon. Some of them will take the first group of consecutive zeros that spans a quartet and turn that into a double colon. So when you start trying to compare those to each other, interesting things happen. I highly recommend, if you're going to store addresses in a database, store them as 128-bit integers. I also highly recommend that when you do this, if you are updating your software, that you do a pass-through and convert all of the v4 address storage to v6 mapped addresses. The : FFFF : v4 address equivalent in bits. because then you have an easy way to compare everything as if it was all a v6 address, and you don't have to do special casing for dealing with v4. Go ahead, Joe.
Yeah, there's a bunch of security companies that finally fixed this one problem, and that it was that they take the first 64 bits and actually shift it as the second 64 bits, and therefore they could never match any patterns.
Nice. Because it's really good when your deny rules don't match, and even better when your permit rules don't match. ACL's geolocation is proving to be a fun one. Client software such as on mobile devices and parsing IP addresses in logs.
What's up with geoloc? What's Maxmine and those guys? Or
Well, all of the above. I mean, even at Akamai, our own, I think we call it Edgescape geolocation service, getting good data for v6 is more of a challenge because you certainly don't want to take it down to the host level. But then the question is, do you take it to the 64? Well, that's an awful lot of potential records. Do you take it to the 48? Well, then you're sticking a whole bunch of victims of ISPs that give out less than a 48 into the same blob. John can talk about that some. If you're, I like to pick on John when I can. We've had the 48 versus 60 argument many times. So where to put that boundary on a geoloc turns out to be a hard problem to solve. And if you've only heard from a few addresses within a large prefix, how much of the prefix you put in the same place that those addresses landed gets interesting. A lot of global companies are going to one RIR and getting a 28 or a 24 and deploying it all over the world. And it's got that one registration in whois, and until you've got better data than that, life gets interesting. And then a lot of those, because of the way the company works, they backhaul everything to one or two firewalls in a couple of places in the world and spit it out from there. And so do you geoloc it to where the firewall is, or do you geoloc it to where the actual end user is, and how do you tell? There's just all kinds of different challenges like that we didn't really have so much with v4 because the firewall was where the address was deployed, and that was the end of it. So that's where geoloc has become more of a challenge in v6. Does that answer your question? Okay.
Yep.
This will be news to most of this room, I know. Not everything that claims to support v6 does. Yeah, that makes for fun. v6 connectivity is still spotty in areas. There are pockets of the v6 internet that have poor connectivity to other pockets. Cogent comes to mind, and their ability to reach Hurricane Electric and vice versa. Client happy eyeballs behavior often shields users from breakage. So unfortunately, this means that we're going to have a lot of things that are broken that we can't tell are broken until we turn off v4. And so that's going to make turning off v4 even more fun. I realize happy eyeballs seemed like a good idea at the time, but it's like NAT. It's one of those things that I think we were going to end up wishing we could uninvent. Fast failover from v6 to v4 when v6 is broken or slower, useful on occasion, but largely it just causes you to not know you have a problem. Path MTU discovery being broken is unfortunately common, but it is actually, in my experience, getting better. I think we're starting to see fewer and fewer places that are blocking the necessary ICMP6 packets. So hopefully that'll progress. That is an area that could benefit from better technology and better testing tools. Fortunately, the impact today is limited to a relatively small set of users, and they tend to be the users that are more early adopters, and so they're willing to pay attention and file bug reports and things like that. Most of the increased complexity that we're seeing comes from having to run both things in parallel, and in the end game, v6 only is the way to go.
Yeah. Owen.
Yes.
I got a problem with your go back one slide. I hate happy eyeballs.
I just said it's one of those things we're going to end up wishing we could uninvent.
Okay, so
I'm not advocating happy eyeballs. I'm calling it
So
a bad thing.
Yeah, well, the reason I specifically hate it is it totally, you made perfect sense where you said it goes slower and all that kind of stuff. So many customers, when I was a Comcast employee, and so many customers would call in and say, hey, I've got my internet slow. So then I'd start looking at their actual connections. Come to find out, Chicago routing had some issues. And so I had to go through every single ticket and look at everybody that complained and figured out that there was a change to a router that had V4 only and not V6. And basically everybody was using the happy eyeballs to switch back and forth. So I hate that.
Yep.
It was the worst thing.
I've been asking around. I'd like to be able to switch off IP eyeballs in browsers. On an enterprise
I'm all for it.
on an enterprise network, I should be able to flip an option and say no more IP eyeballs.
That works for me. If you can get the browser vendors to implement it, I think that's a great idea. You know, maybe we need to add a flag to Slack that says, configure this host with no happy eyeballs support. I'm all for it. Get it through the IETF and into the browsers and into the hosts, and that'd be great. Because I think anytime you take a network that has a deterministic behavior and make it less deterministic in the name of a better user experience, you ultimately end up with a network that is harder to troubleshoot. And you end up with a temporarily better user experience at the expense of not being able to actually fix what's broken. So you don't actually get a better user experience in the long run.
You want to get away from happy eyeballs, just deliver a quad A record.
Nope. Nope. Oh, yeah, deliver only a quad A record. That will eliminate happy eyeballs. That's true.
So IPv6 only is the correct thing?
Yes, IPv6 only, but the problem is that turning off V4 while happy eyeballs is out there, you don't know what problems are hidden from you that are going to be even worse when you turn off V4. So happy eyeballs is standing in the way because it prevents us from solving some of those problems before we really inflict them on the user.
Hey, Owen, quick question.
Yeah.
So, and it's really for the room. Has anybody thought of other ways? I mean, like turning off V4 is pretty abrupt, right?
Yeah.
Has anybody thought about other ways to do this? I mean, we've looked at a few things like not caching A records, things like that, to kind of really further encourage more V6, less happy eyeballs and stuff like that, right? And anybody else have any similar insane thoughts?
For most networks, I like that idea. In my particular case, the first thing they told me when I joined the company was, you can break stuff, just don't hurt performance.
Yep.
So I think if I start saying something like, let's stop caching A records, they're going to tell me that, I'm done.
You're fired, right?
Yeah.
So the other thing is one of the things that we found recently, we have some preliminary data that we could look at. It might be too late for the next version of this meeting, but we found that recursion up actually performs a lot better over V6.
Yep.
So if you have a name server that has the ability to prefer a quad ANS record over a single A record, another opportunity to kind of improve performance. So that is right in your wheelhouse.
Yep.
Akamai.
I'm pretty sure we already actually do that. Of course, most of our name servers are not resolvers so much as authoritative, but we do. Yeah. Many of them, as a matter of fact. So the pros of moving to V6 typically outweigh the cons. I realize that's news to everybody in this room, but there it is. I'll say it. Very few customers have reported origin side issues on the CDN, so that's been pretty well. And waiting just increases your risk, really. So how do I leverage it? Well, we've got V6 configured in over 109 countries, 600 cities, 700 networks, 1,900 server locations in total. That's probably north of 50% of our total deployments. I can't say how much north of 50%, but the reality is that the locations where it's not enabled are providers that aren't doing V6 yet, for the most part, and so we just don't have the option of turning it on. As soon as a provider notifies us that they're willing to do V6 with us, we bring that up to speed and it's on there. All of our software, all of our hardware is all V6 ready. We're not deploying anything that can't do V6 at this point, but we can only push the vendors, the ISPs that we're not paying rather, so hard, and they move when they move. Peak traffic, V6, well over 2 terabits per second at this point. In fact, I think it's closer to 4 at this point. As I said, the data in these slides is a little bit older. It's from fourth quarter last year, so things are progressing. Dual stacking edge servers, customer properties can be dual stacked. We'll terminate IPv4 and IPv6 connections, even if we're doing a v4 origin fetch, and soon we'll be able to do terminate dual stack connections and fetch v6 only origins. So that'll be nice. This is all just the stuff you guys already know, so I'm not gonna go into too much detail. For new host names, just leave v4, v6 selected. That's the new default anyway. Expect IP address and IP prefix fields to have either v4 or v6 when you receive them as headers if you're working with our CDN. Reporting interfaces, if you're an Akamai customer, you know about this already. Go forth and dual stack. I realize I'm flashing through these slides pretty quick, but a lot of them have a lot of content that is just not going to be that meaningful to this room. And so if you want to talk more about any of these details, feel free to catch me afterwards. More graphs of up and to the right. And at that point, I'm going to ask if anybody has questions.
I will make one comment. In June of 2012, as part of the Federal IPv6 Task Force and following the 2010 memo, we had recommended, and a number of agencies went to Akamai because you had v6 facing websites, even though the back end to the actual agencies was still v4.
And we appreciated it.
I was one of those that was pushing it. The problem was in 2014, they wanted to do the same thing, and we said, no, 2014, you got to have v6 all the way. So, but we thanked you guys for doing that.
Yeah, no problem.
Any questions?
Anybody else? Questions, comments, rotten fruit? v6 addresses?
Sorry, just a snarky one.
Sure.
Owen, you seem to have changed your name to Eric.
Yeah, it happens sometimes. I did mention this was not my slide deck.
Thanks.
Yes, it's a v6 privacy email. No, I got most of this content from Eric Nygren. He deserves a lot of credit for putting this all together. So.
Anybody else?
Well, great. I got you guys out of here a little bit early. Have a good afternoon.
So with that, that's our final presentation of this IPv6 Summit. Just wanted to thank you all for being here. We wouldn't have an event if it weren't for all of you, all of our great speakers. And thanks, of course, to LinkedIn for letting us use their facilities here.
Yes, thank you all for coming to the IPv6 Summit. I hope that this was as great an experience for you as it was for me. We heard great talks from our speakers. Thank you, speakers. We had stimulating conversations with each other, and we got encouragement that, yes, we really can deploy IPv6. I mean, if Frank can deploy email, right? And if Cisco can do Building 23, and heck, if John can do Comcast, then any of us can do it. So there's no excuses. Go make it happen.